Good afternoon, everyone. It's April 7th, 2020. Today is going to be part 3 of my study from 1 John verses 4 through 7, chapter 4, 17 through 21, and it's centered around the idea of perfect love casting out fear. John tells us in verse 21 of the same chapter that he who loves God loves his brother also. And he calls it a commandment. Love is hard to command. But John has been called the love disciple. Other disciples, New Testament authors, talk about faith and justification and grace, but John repeatedly goes back to love. Over and over again. Maybe, just maybe, he is overwhelmed with the fact that God loves him. That God could love someone like him. I think that's a good place to be overwhelmed with the idea that God loves you. I think that idea itself is life-changing. And John connects being loved by God, knowing he loves you and loving him back, with how much we can love other people, how well we love other people. He does not see love as a commandment then. He sees it as the evidence that you have experienced God's love, that you know it personally, and that you have loved God back. Chapter 4, verse 19, John says this: we love him because he first loved us. So right in the middle of all this command to have perfect love without fear and to love boldly and to love your brother, John says we only love because God loved us first. In other words, John says if you don't love your brother, you really don't love God. And you probably really have not experienced, at least in the moment, how much God loves you. John sees brother as any person that he knows. It's not physical brother in the sense of flesh and blood. It's not spiritual brother in the sense of church. He sees brother as the neighbor that Jesus talked about in Mark chapter 12, verse 29 through 31, where he says, love your neighbor as yourself. To John, my neighbor is my brother. It is interesting that the Gospel of John is the only one that does not mention Jesus telling the scribe that the greatest commandment is to love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And that the second commandment is like unto it, and what Jesus means by like unto it is this: the evidence that you love God is love your neighbor as yourself. This is a hard concept for us because we kind of think we can love God separate from loving people, and that's not, we can't do that. I think that John didn't put that story of the scribe in the greatest commandment in his gospel because for John it was the underlying theme of his gospel. It's the foundation that he wrote the Gospel of John on in his first letter, the first John, which we're working this study from. Bottom line is this: if we love God in this day of fear, we are to boldly love those who are our neighbors. If we've experienced God's love, then it should change the way we love. It should transform us. I've been listening to people talk about what they've done to show love to other people. And even my wife and I in our home, we've been involved in distributing food to people, making phone calls, checking up on people. We have mailed cards. We got a phone call this morning from an elderly man that we sent a card to, and he said, thank you so much for that lovely card. And he's isolated. And then this afternoon, we're doing, I'd call it Christmas caroling, but it's not Christmas. We are going with another family from the church, and we're going to take our hymn books and go to a nursing home, to a senior living center, to some people that are shut in and sing outside their door, sing Amazing Grace in the garden, and I'm not sure what other songs. So the point of all this is I would love to hear from you in the comment section underneath the YouTube video, the creative things that you have done to show love to your brother because of the love of God that's in your heart. So may God richly bless you today. May he keep you well. May you know his peace in the stress of our world today. Amen.